para dar uma palestra. Bem vestido desse jeito para dar palestra. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's good to have you all here. Today's beautiful day, even though it's cold, but it's absolutely stunning, beautiful, with the sun shining, and it's good to be here all together again. Braving all that snow outside, and like a lot of obstacles to get here, but we're all here today. And to have another lecture today, we're going to be talking about Allan Kardec. Who's Allan Kardec? We're going to have this lecture given by our friend Tiago. And before we start our lecture, we're going to have our reading with our friend Patrick and the initial prayer.
Morning.
Morning.
All right. Even tough people. We are reading for the book Happy Life from Divaldo Franco, brought from by the Spirit Joana de Angelis. Even tough people appear to be bad or selfish, or because they afflict or mistreat you, do not plan revenge. There are those who enjoy doing evil, who upset others and take pleasure in it. These are beings at a primary level, who are still acquiring the light of reason and emotional sensitivity. It is unfair for you to lower yourself to their level and suffer more, when you can help raise them and yourself and change the world's moral landscape for the better. May your magnanimous actions show an understanding of the failing and limits of your neighbor. You will never be sorry if you act in this way. All right. So with this message, let's close our eyes, elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus, to God, and thank the opportunity to be here another week, to learn a little bit more about Jesus' teachings and everything that Kardec with the spirits was able to bring to us. Let's ask the good spirits to enlighten our friend Tiago to bring us the lecture that he, with the support of the spiritual world, prepared. Thank you, and so be it.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you, everyone, for being here today. As Teresa said, it's a beautiful Sunday, and we're gonna talk about Allan Kardec. Who was this guy, and why do we talk about him so much? So in the next 45 minutes or so, I'm gonna try to tell the main events of his life and what he accomplished, and try to get some understanding on why he is so important to us. I don't have my remote is here. Let's see if it works. I don't think so. I have to ask your help. Oh, good thought. Let's see.
Try again.
Okay. Now it works. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back one and maybe. Okay, so Allan Kardec is we know him like this. That's he's usually portrayed. This very serious gentleman who we know has brought us the books of what we call the Spiritist codification, and that speaks a little bit of his personality, although some of his friends' reports tell us that he was not always that serious like this. He would be someone that would be joyful amongst his friends and would have a pleasant laugh. But because he lived most of his life as a scholar, and I think because when people were portrayed, they didn't want to see like goofy, he would show up like this as a very serious and scholar man. But let's go from the start. So he was born in Lyon, France, on October 3rd, 1804. And here's a picture of Lyon on the current day. So seems to be a very beautiful city. I've never been there, but I kind of want to visit one day. Um, he was not born with the name of Allan Kardec. His birth name was Hippolyte Léon Denisard Rivail. So we'll call him, at least at this point, Boy Denisard, because that's just easier. And he was son of Jean-Baptiste Antoine Rivail and Jeanne Duhamel. Jean-Baptiste is reported to be a judge with an extensive career in magistrature, and he came from a family that had a long career on that field as well. And at least on the reports that we have, Jeanne Duhamel was just described as his wife, but I think that's just a reflection of the time. But anyway, so the boy Denisard was born in a very well-known family of Lyon that had a very good reputation in magistrature. So it was thought that Denisard would follow the same career. But as we will know in the next couple of slides, that's not exactly what happened. I want to touch base on the context of France at that time, very briefly. So at the time of Denisard's birth, which was 1804, it was just the aftermath of the French Revolution, which had taken place between 1789 and 1799. So it was a moment of turmoil in French history. And as you probably know, this revolution influenced all over the world, and it still has reflections on how we organize ourselves politically today. By the end of what is known as the French Revolution, Napoleon had taken power, and right at the time of Denisard's birth, Napoleon had crowned himself emperor. So this was a very changing time for France and also in Europe, because it was a time that we were starting to understand that monarchies were not as suitable anymore, or at least the word of the king was not a direct representation of the word of God. And this came from a lot of development of the previous centuries with the philosophers such as Jean-Jacques Rousseau. So it was a society that was leaning towards secularism and was putting more value on scientific rationalism. Like philosophy was blooming at that time, and it was a time that science was started to bloom as well, with several discoveries, several studies that would come the next few years. It was also a time of deep social changes. There were still a lot of people in poverty, and although the middle class was rising to power at that time with the revolutions that were happening, France was still at that time facing a lot of social inequalities. So that was the context of France at that time. So that was the context in which our boy Denisard was born. So, as a kid, when you have a kid, you have to put them in school. And Denisard started his school years in Lyon itself, but not long after he was sent to Switzerland to study at the Yverdon Institute under Professor Pestalozzi. Now, I think I should talk a little bit about Professor Pestalozzi because he's an important figure, and if you search about him online, you're gonna see that he has a impressive biography himself, and he had great influence on how Denisard, future Allan Kardec, would approach Spiritism in the future, and how he would approach all the fields of science that he engaged into. So Professor Pestalozzi was a Swiss pedagogue and educational reformer. He influenced a lot in the educational models that were implemented in Europe at that time. And he had a motto that was learning by head, hand, and heart, which was very interesting. So Learning by head means the essentially the cognition, the intelligence that has to be developed. Hand means the practical way, or essentially develop the dexterity to perform works. And also heart, meaning bring the affection and compassion to the classroom. He would let kids learning using their own resources and develop from there. And that was a revolution at that time. Many people came to study with Pestalozzi, and his educational model was implemented in England, for example, or around Germany. And actually, the person that created the kindergarten studied with Pestalozzi, and had that's one of the examples how his influences is still present nowadays. He valued the powers of attention, observation, and memory. So this is very important. He would teach his kids that to be very attentive, to observe a phenomenon, to observe an event, and then after that, draw their conclusions. Meaning, do not go with preconceived ideas. Observe the event, and then you can draw your conclusions afterwards. It was very important because with his model, illiteracy in Switzerland was nearly abolished around 1830. Um, and the Institute, Yverdon Institute, was one of his endeavors and was probably the most long-standing one. But he had other endeavors as well before he reached Yverdon. And at the time that he built the Yverdon Institute, like, he was already famous around Europe, and several children from other countries were sent to study with him in his boarding school, and that is the castle of the Yverdon Institute nowadays. So the boy Denizar was sent to Switzerland to study under Professor Pestalozzi, and through the years, Denizar, he really exceeded himself. He studied a lot of arts, different languages, science. He even engaged in teaching his classmates, which was something that Pestalozzi would stimulate. Like, you help your other classmates to learn, and that way you learn yourself. And he became one of the Pestalozzi's collaborators. So often Pestalozzi was called to other countries to start institutions similar to Yverdon. And at that time, Denizar would be running the school in his absence. So that's how close their relationship became. The Yverdon Institute, unfortunately, closed its doors, at least at that time, in 1825. But at that time, Kardec had already come back to France. So what happened after now the man Denizar came back to France? He had obtained his bachelor's degree in letters and science, and he was able to speak several languages. So obviously French, which was his native language, but he was also fluent in German and English, and he also could communicate in Dutch. I only speak two languages, so imagine that. And one is my native. So when he came back to France, he may have spent a little bit of time in Lyon, but he ended up going to Paris. And he wanted to start his own educational institute in that city, using the same model that Pestalozzi used in Yverdon. So when you want to start something like that, like an institute for tutoring, you need financial support. So he had some setbacks trying to do that. So he had a financial association with one of his uncles. And then the institute bankrupted because of the uncle's addiction to gambling. So he had, the shares. He had the shares with him and his wife at that time. And the share of the institute was then lost after he entrusted it to a friend who had bad business, and then that friend never paid him back, so he was without money. So that didn't work out, which I imagine would be very frustrating for our man Denizar at that time. But when I was reading about this, I thought, well, we all of us have that, difficult relative. If you don't have one, maybe, well, let's not go there. Um, so he didn't feel that discouraged. I mean, he needs to find something else to continue his education endeavors. So he started working a lot. He wrote books on grammar, arithmetic, and also on pedagogical studies. And he also worked with translation of works from English to German. And he opened his house a space to teach children about several topics such as chemistry, physics, astronomy, and comparative anatomy. And those courses were very well attended. So you see, he actually deviated from the course of magistrature of the law and went into education, which ended up being his passion at that time. Uh, During that time, he also got married. His wife was Amélie Gabrielle Boudet. I unfortunately could not find a representation of Miss Boudet when she was younger, and that was the only one that I could easily find. But she became Kardec's wife. She was 9 years older than him. Um, as far as, well, they did not have any children, and she became a support for him throughout his endeavors, both before he was called Allan Kardec, and most especially after he was called Allan Kardec and during the Spiritist codification. So she was certainly a very important figure in his life, and we don't talk about her too much, unfortunately. So, as a scholar and an academic, Denisard had a number of publications that had influence in the educational model of France and were used in universities and to teach children in schools, etc. So, just to name a few one, he published what's called the Practical Course and Theoretical and Practical Course of Arithmetics according to the method of Pestalozzi, the proposed plan for the improvement of the public education, classic French grammar under a new plan, grammatical catechism, that is very interesting, of the French language, and manual for the test for exams of capacity to obtain a diploma. So here's one picture of one of his publications, and you can see here his sign as HLD Revile. So he was very respected and very well known at that time. His books were being published and read all over Paris and all over France. And because of that, he became known in the academic environment and was part of a number of scientific societies engaging in studies in various fields of science. With the classes that he was giving and the books that he was publishing, he was able to recover financially. And although he was not rich, he was able to live a modest life and continue his life as someone normally would. So even though he had that setback with his uncle and his friend, he was able to recover, having a job in education, and a very influential one. And then we have the turning point. So he was. So he was, as I said, he was living very well. He could continue living his academic life, publishing his articles, publishing his books. But then at that time in France, he heard about a phenomenon that was called the turning tables, or here, as you said, la table tournante. What was that? So the society at that time had found something new to entertain themselves with, which was seeing tables turning and moving by itself, probably with the help of what they call magnetism at that time, or sometimes as a magic show. And it's interesting how some habits repeat themselves. Because looking at this, I remembered when I was in high school, and maybe you have experienced that as well, that some kids like to play of summoning spirits either by Ouija board or playing with like a glass. In my time, it was with a pen. But I think this is kind of a recurrent, episode during adolescence. I think just people are curious and want to prove that they're brave, and so I see that kind of the same thing. They wanted to be curious. They want to know what would happen with their lives, who they're gonna marry with, like asking frivolous questions. But that was most as a pastime with them. Um, but some people look at that with some interest. And some of those people were Kardec's acquaintances, they were Kardec's friends. And one of them was someone called Mr. Carlotti. Uh, so Mr. Carlotti one time went to Kardec and said, "Oh, so we have this phenomena that is happening all over Paris that people are very excited about. So essentially, the we ask questions to the tables, and the tables are talking. Like, can you believe that?" And Denizar at that time described that Mr. Carlotti was a very good person, had a very good soul, but was just too enthusiastic. He was too excited about anything. So he didn't give that much attention. He said, "Yeah, okay, table stalking. Yeah, okay, I'll believe it when I see it." So he didn't buy it at that time. I know this phenomenon was continued to happen, and more people were interested in it. And he had another of his friends. He was his friend for about 25 years, Mr. Patier, and he spoke about the same phenomenon, but he spoke with not enthusiasm. He spoke in a very cool and composed nature, very serious. He was a very serious person. He was a person that was interested in magnetism at that time. So he said, "Well, we see those tables. They turn, they tap, and they are give us messages." And then, at that time, Denizar gave some attention, but he said, "Well, I don't believe it right away, but I will observe what is going on. What's going on here?" So he didn't believe right away, but he agreed to observe the phenomenon. So he started to attend the sessions, and then that really gave him an impression. He said, "Okay, so something is happening here. Those tables are moving around. Sometimes they are just standing up in the air without no support." So that impressed him, and he said, "Well, I have to understand what's going on here. Why is this happening?" And he approached this with a very positivistic framework. So I will talk a little bit about positivism, what that is. It's not going to be that long, but just with an excerption of Kardec's writing, he said, "I had to be positivistic and not idealistic to keep from allowing myself to become deluded." So positivism, in very brief words, is this philosophical current in which says that knowledge only comes from observable, objective, and measurable data. And this influences until nowadays how we produce new scientific knowledge. If you have an event, you have to observe that event, you have to collect the data, and then you have to measure that data, you have to have a way to measure that. And with the data that you analyze, you have to draw a conclusion or even new hypothesis from that data. So most, I say, science is essentially built nowadays, essentially built over positivism. Like at least for like in the medical field, it's very how we do it. Like we have an experiment, you give a medication, you see what happened, you measure the data, and then you see if that's significant or not, and then you publish a paper, and then go on and so forth. That's how you produce science. And Kardec approached that with that same framework. He said, okay, uh, I see the tables turning, I see the tables tapping, moving around, so I have to understand why this is happening. So that's where you see the Pestalozzi's influence on how he approached this. Because back then, Pestalozzi said you have to observe the phenomenon without preconceived ideas, and then you draw your hypotheses and your conclusions from it. So he did not consider right away that this was something supernatural. He considered that the hypothesis that the movement of the tables could have a physical cause. At that time, the 19th century, there were a lot of studies on magnetism, and electricity was a new thing. The studies in electricity were starting to happen. So he even writes on one of his books that, well, I consider that this could be electricity. Like, for example, lightning can cause like very loud noises. Or could this be something related to the expansion of the wood? Because when you apply heat to a wood, that wood will expand and then it can cause noises, for example. So he considered that that could be a physical cause that he could not yet explain at that time. But what actually drew his attention is that the phenomena in itself was generating intelligent responses. Like he would ask questions, and then the tables would reply, and the replies would make sense. Some of them not only the yes or no, but he started to receive more complex answers for the questions that were being asked. So he said, okay, wait a minute. A table is a table, a piece of wood is a piece of wood. Okay, I can make it move probably by a physical cause, but that would not be able to give me a meaningful, intelligent answer. So, very philosophically, he concluded that, well, if something intelligent is telling me this, then this phenomenon has to have an intelligent cause, right? So what started his research and his more deep investigation on what was causing those very strange phenomena at that time. He also observed that the phenomenon required the presence of persons with the ability to communicate with spirits, and those were called mediums. Just coming back, in one of the communications with the turning tables, he was asked who is the person that is communicating, and he said, well, I am a spirit, right? And then that's how he started to call those phenomena caused by spirits, and then he observed that those phenomena would only occur in the presence of persons with this ability to communicate, which he called mediums, and we call mediums until this day. In the beginning, it was very rudimentary. So the turning tables would tap, for example, one tap for yes, two taps for no, or they would organize an alphabet, and then the table would move to that alphabet, and then the spirits themselves start to suggest more practical and more effective ways of communicating. First, they said, well, get a basket and attach a pencil to it, and then put the basket on the top of a sheet of paper, and then have the mediums just holding the rim of the basket. And then when they start to do that, the pencil would start to move by itself and write full sentences, full texts, more rapidly than it would happen if they were just tapping like a number of times for the alphabet and for the phrases to be formed. And then at some point they said, well, have the medium hold the pencil or hold the pen. And then at that time they observed that it was kind of a frenetic way that the mediums would start to write. And that ended up becoming the most effective way of communication. And that's what probably one of we know the most nowadays, and was very, I would say, popularized by Chico Xavier, who was a Brazilian medium, passed away in 2002. But he was known of bringing psychography from several spirits, like the ladders of Chico, and also the several books that he psychographed and published, spreading the word of the Spiritist doctrine. So at that, though, in the beginning, it was not like this, not as fast like this. It was very rudimentary, and the spirits themselves started to suggest better ways of communicating. And then Kardec started to dive into the content of the messages that were passed. So he noticed that when he was not present in some of those sessions, like the questions, the answers were very frivolous, were things about like everyday life, for example. Oh, am I gonna marry that person? Or like, am I gonna get that amount of money? Am I gonna get like an inheritance or something like that? So those were like the frivolous questions that were being asked. But when Kardec was present in those sessions, he started to notice that the content of the message was more complex and was deeper than was previously reported. So by gathering those messages, he started to draw a few conclusions. Some of those were that spirits are nothing more than human souls and do not possess supreme knowledge nor supreme wisdom. That was very important because at that time the phenomenon of the turning tables was seen like an oracle, and it was faced that the spirits would know everything and their word was final. And then Kardec, analyzing the answer, said, no, that's not what's happening. They're just humans in a different stage, and they do not know everything. They do not have the supreme power or wisdom. They're just in a different state. So you cannot take everything that they say as absolute truth. They said their opinions have value only as personal opinions. So my opinion is much as valid as as a discarnate spirit over a given topic, right? However, each spirit may be able to teach us something. Like you can learn something from what they say, from the way they present, and from essentially what they tell you. So what Kardec started to do was gather that information from several sources, catalog, and compare to one another. So he got all that raw data, he brought together and said, okay, let's catalog this. Let's see what is consistent between all these communications, and let's see what makes sense. And with that, he started to categorize, to catalog, to classify, and he started to notice that there were a few gaps and that needed answer. So after that, he started to prepare himself for the sessions with questions that he had prepared beforehand. And these questions were later the basis for the Spirits book, which was the first book that he published of the what we call Spiritist codification. The first edition was published in 1857. Oops. And then you can wonder why the name Allan Kardec. Until at that point, he was called Denisard, which was his original name, or at that time, more likely Professor Revive, because he was already a professor. Why did he not publish the books of Spiritism under the name Professor Revive? I mean, he could have used his very well-known and respected name to spread the knowledge that he was receiving at that time. That was under the advice of the spirit. So in one particular communication, a spirit told him that he knew him from a previous life. And on that previous life, he was a druid. And the druid is kind of a Celtic cleric or a Celtic priest. And during that time when he was living as a druid, his name was Allan Kardec. And he was advised to use that name to publish all the works that he would develop on Spiritism. And the reason for that is they advised to separate his own scholar work, his academic work, from the work that actually came from the spirits. Because the content from the Spirits book and of the books that followed were not created by Kardec himself. He actually just gathered all the data, codified and organized it, and transmitted it. But the work was not from him. So he was seen as more like a messenger. So that's why he separated his scholar academic work from the Spiritist work, and he published the Spiritist book and the other books under the name of Allan Kardec. Over time, while he was making the questions to the spirits in the several sessions, and while analyzing the content of the answers, he started to realize that that was taking the body of a doctrine, meaning that was just not a new field of science, but it was essentially a revelation that should be brought to the world, and that was the time that that should be brought. And he had received the mission to translate that and make that public, and not only keep that to himself. So he published the Spiritist book in 1857. If you ever had chance to read the Spiritist book, it's I like to call it a very dynamic and interesting book. Well, I call it dynamic because the format is question and answer. The first edition had about, and if memory doesn't fail me, 517 questions. Then he did a second edition, which I think that's one that became definitive, and that's the one that we base on today, that has 1,019 questions. The Spirit's book approaches several aspects of the life, from God, creation of the worlds, creation of spirits, divine justice, and the moral laws. So it's a very interesting book to read. Following that, he published the Medium's book, which is essentially a manual of mediumship and talks about the practical aspects of spiritism and how the mediums can develop themselves, and give some advice on what difficulties the mediums may find during their journey. One that we talk about a lot, and I don't want to say that the others are not important, but this is particularly special, which is the Gospel According to Spiritism, which contains essentially the summary of the moral laws that are a reflection of the teachings of Christ. And it's a very important book. Heaven and Hell dives into the divine justice according to Spiritism, and it tells us how the state of the spirits in the afterlife, and how that makes sense according to the justice of God. The Genesis was the last book of what we call the codification, and essentially summarized the scientific aspects of Spiritism. It's said to be a very difficult book, but I think we should all, there is a sense that it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. So we have this fear that it's too scientific and that is difficult to read, but it's also a very interesting book. He also published a few other things. There's this book called What is Spiritism, which is a summary of the Spiritist doctrine, like in a shorter version. There is an even shorter version called Spiritism in its simplest expression, which is like a very small book, like a brochure like that. And also very summarized, and it's very interesting to read if you do not know much about Spiritism. During that time, Kardec also published what we call the Spiritist magazine, or the Revue Spirit, which was a journal that was published periodically with studies and debates on Spiritism. So I heard another speaker saying that was kind of his laboratory. He would bring topics on Spiritism and sometimes bring debates and address questions that were brought by detractors, people that were questioning what was being published. So it was very interesting too. So it's like we in the scientific field, like for example, medicine, we have all those journals that are published periodically. So Spiritism, having its one foot on the science, as I would say, also had its own periodic journal, if I may say like this. Um, Talking about Kardec's mission, so as I said, he started to realize that the messages that he was receiving start to have the body of a doctrine, and he understood that he should not keep that to himself, but he should publish that knowledge in an accessible way to everyone. Um, so one of his guides during that process was a spirit that called himself the Truth. Um, that gave several advices for him. There's one instance in which uh, Kardec was at his home and he heard some knocks that he could not identify where it came from. So in a few days later, he was in a session, and then he was asking about the knocks that he was hearing, and the Spirit Truth said, "Well, that was me. I want to call your attention because what you wrote on that page between lines 3 and 30th is not the way it should be. That is wrong." And then Kardec said, "Yeah, but I already made some corrections," and said, "Yeah, it's better, but it still needs some improvement." And then he went back and reread it and said, "Yes, that needs correction." Right. And the Spirit Truth was, probably one of he's probably the main guide and actually guided, the spread of Spiritism and the publication of the books and everything that came after. So in one communication, he said about Kardec's mission that it was difficult, for it involves the stirring up and transformation of the whole world. Do not think that it will be enough to publish one book, 2 books, 10 books, and you're going to be resting at your house. Terrible hatred will be aroused against you. Implacable enemies will plot your ruin. You'll be exposed to slander and betrayal. Your best teachings will be attacked and twisted. You will succumb more than once to the weight of fatigue. You have to bear almost constant struggle, sacrifice your rest, your peace, your health, and even your life, for you will not live very long. Would you take that mission? I mean, I think most of us would say no, thank you, because it's a lot. I mean, if you don't see that things are easy, you may back out. But at the same time, he was told that he would receive a lot of help throughout the way. Uh, and indeed, Kardec, in one of his writings, he says that everything that the Spirit Truth had told him that would happen actually took place. Uh, his name was dishonored. He felt betrayed, even from people that were closest to him. So you can imagine how hard that was for him. All his teachings were twisted, uh, but even then he carried on with his mission. One particular canonic event is something that happened in Barcelona. It's called the Auto de Fé, or the Act of Faith. So what happened is that he was already publishing a few books. He had already published the Spirit's book and the Medium's book at that time. And the Spiritist was getting well known, and he was sending some books to Barcelona. So he had paid all the fees to sell in another country, and then the books were retained essentially by the Catholic Church, saying that this cannot be sold in Spain. This is an attack to the Catholic Church. And Kardec tried to ask for the books back, and they said, no, the Catholic Church is universal. That's an universal attack. So we're going to burn these books. And that's what happened. So they burned the books in a public square. Very much like the Inquisition, although the Inquisition had officially ended at that time. So Kardec was very disappointed when that happened, but the spirits told him, said, let it go, let it happen, and don't worry about it. Things will happen the way they should. And indeed, this event only stimulated the interest on Spiritism in Spain. So actually, this had the reverse effect that they wanted. So Spiritism was even more widespread after this. So that's why the Spirit said, just let it happen. But that will be taken care of. And in this Gospel according to Spiritism, there is a passage that says that even though there is a hardest trial, there is always a consolation. And in one of his letters to the Spiritists of Lyon in 1862, uh, Kardec mentions that he had some consolation despite all the trials that he was going through. He said that he had extraordinary satisfaction in the establishing of a new doctrine, and seeing the one in which I have devoted myself grow and prosper during my lifetime with marvelous speed. I regard it as a great favor from heaven to be a witness to the good that it has already produced. This fact, which I receive the most touching testimonies daily, has paid me back with interest for all my hardship, all my weariness. So, despite all the troubles that he faced, uh, the spread of Spiritism was also very well received amongst the people, and especially in Lyon, which was his birthplace. So that's why he sometimes he addressed some letters directly to the Spiritists of Lyon. And he was very happy to see that the Spiritist teachings were taken seriously, and he was seeing transformation in the people that were receiving those teachings. So that was his greatest joy and the consolation, despite all the troubles that he was facing for carry on his mission. So, what is the message of Spiritism, and why is it so important to us? So, there is a motto of Spiritism that without the charity, there is no salvation. Which, if you dive into it, is essentially a reflection of the law of love the Lord your God and your neighbor as yourself. So, if you think of it, why were people attacking something that is a reflection of Christ's law in itself? What happens that Spiritism was gathering objective, observable data by the communication of the spirits that what Jesus said about 2,000 years ago was true and now was more comprehensible. With the data that Kardec gathered, organized, and cataloged, he actually gave material proof that there is a life that continues after this material life, and that the justice that Jesus so much talked about now made more sense. You had to remember that at that time, the society was become more secular and more rational. So the dogmas of the church were not enough for several people. And then with the Spiritist philosophy, the Spiritist doctrine, and now the scientific method, that made it more palpable and more rational for the people. So actually, Spiritism would enhance people's faith in the future and in Jesus' teachings. One of the questions of the Spiritist book is, what is the most, I'll say, perfect model to follow the laws of God? And they say, look at Jesus. Jesus is your model and your guide. So I would say Spiritism brings more proof of the teachings of Jesus about love yourself and love your neighbor as yourself and help each other, collaborate with each other. And that was Kardec's mission, just making clearer and reinforcing what had been taught for several years. Just this Wednesday, we in our book study that happens Wednesdays from 7 to 8, like we're talking about this, like we are essentially coming back to the core teachings every thousands of years. Like Moses, when he brought the tablets of the 10 Commandments, the first two are love God and love your neighbor. When Jesus comes a few thousands of years later, there's a passage where he says, I will summarize the law and the prophets in 2 commandments, which is love God and love your neighbor as yourself. And then Kardec, with the teaching of the spirits, now we're bringing more the scientific method to it, and all the philosophy behind it goes back to the same thing. Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. So every time we are being taught again, because probably we haven't learned yet, but now we have more comprehension that makes more sense to us. So that's why Spiritism was so important because it opened our eyes and opened our minds. And we see that we do not need so much rituals or to the exterior acts of, for example, oh, I need to, you know, pray X number of times, otherwise it won't work. We understand like prayer, well, however you do it, if it comes from the heart, no, God will hear you, amongst other teachings. So the reason why it brought so much attention, so much people against it, because it was breaking the establishment, it was breaking very old traditions, and whenever that happens, people get scared with it. But despite all the people contrary to it, and besides the burning of books in Barcelona, for example, that the Spiritists started to spread to other people, and we were able to get to know it a little bit more today. So Kardec passed away or discarnated in 1869 on the 31st of March. And his remains, Allan Kardec's remains, are now buried in the graveyard of the Père Lachaise in Paris. He was actually initially buried in Montmartre, and then his remains were transferred afterwards. And that is a photo of his grave, as it is today. I had the chance of visiting Paris a few times, and I went to his grave, and it's a very interesting feeling, because for me it was like, okay, I know he's not there, it's just his remains, but it still brings that emotion of seeing this his grave. It's always covered with flowers, and on the top there is a writing that essentially about the law of to be born and be born again, keep progressing. That's the law, and that's a reflection of all the teachings that he brought to us through the spirits, and all the influence that he has in several people to nowadays. So when I went there, I just felt very grateful and very emotional. And it just reflects how important Spiritism is to me, and it is for other people. I think I'll finish here, and open for questions.
I had been to the grave. There is an energy, and we don't know it's not there. Everything is just not even the remains by now. Even them already disintegrated. But it is funny because I went to the office to grab the map, because they have a map with all those people that you can visit at Père Lachaise, Edith Piaf and Chopin. And the guy told me that is the only one that has flowers all year round. It's his. And I remember there was this French lady who was there like praying, and she said that when she needs kind of recharging energy, she goes there, because it just became that point in her mind where she can like re-energize. And actually she said to thank for what he brought to her, like what the knowledge that he brought to her. So for her it's important to be there, and really gives that. It's fun because we know it's just it's just stone, but
it is different.
It is different.
It is different.
There's an energy coming from there that is just so beautiful. And by the amount of flowers that it had, like you couldn't even barely get close to the amount of flowers. You see how many people go there just to say thank you for the work that he had brought to us. Because his life really, was here, had to give up like halfway.
Yeah, definitely. Okay.
How did he die?
Oh, he had an aneurysm. So essentially, one of his arteries was dilated and bursted, and it was like a sudden death. He was okay in one moment, and then he passed away on the other second. They describe it was like going to sleep.
He was kind of sick by the end. All the hard work done, right? He was tired.
It was. He was at one point. He was waking up at 4:30 a.m. to do the writings, answering to people, like to be able to take care of everything. So it was a lot on him. At one point, he tried to resign from the Parisian Spiritual Society, and they said, "No, we don't take your resignation." uh, oh, yeah.
I just want to say, well, it was a good question. I didn't
Yeah.
know about that.
Yeah.
And awesome presentation.
Mhm.
Thank you. It was really detailed and, you know, full of information. I just want to do a little marketing for Netflix.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The wonderful movie we have.
Yeah.
Kardec.
There is a movie, as I think was released just before the pandemic. It's called Kardec. If you go on Netflix, it's there. It's a Brazilian movie in Portuguese, but if you have subtitles, you can watch it. It's a very nice one. Yeah.
I just you made a comparison
Mm.
that it's I have been doing this for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
So you compare a little bit the Old Testament with Moses,
Mm-hmm.
The New Testament
Mhm.
that was not written by Jesus
Mhm.
but by several people,
Mm-hmm.
and Allan Kardec.
Mm-hmm.
Take Moses out.
Mhm.
Jesus didn't write anything. Kardec made comments,
Mhm.
didn't write as well. Right? He put things together. That
Mhm.
was the beautiful,
Mhm.
the beauty of his work, right? So I think the beauty of Allan Kardec was three things, in my opinion. He put all these effort together. That was his mission, as you said. Second, he allow us to question what it's in the book. So he said, every time that science prove whatever is written here differently, go by the science. So these unlock
Mm-hmm.
a strength on his words
Mhm.
that it's out of the roof for me.
Mhm.
Because I think it's the only book that can evolve. Because when Moses put something together on the book, it was written for that people that were there.
Mhm.
And when we read today, we read it with a different mind.
Mhm.
The same for Jesus, right? Or from the New Testament,
Mhm.
right? When Paul says, in Paulo, I think for Corinthians, that says that the man has it's higher than a woman. It's for his society, not for our
Mhm.
society. Okay? When Allan Kardec put his words that allow me to progress on the readings, it's amazing for me. So I just finished the New Testament.
Mhm.
I'm reading the Quran.
Oh wow.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a book that it's very difficult because it was written in 600, from 600 to 1,000, right?
Mhm.
Not more than 1,000 years. But the books from Allan Kardec help me to progress
Mhm.
because, guys, it's like a 3,000 years ago was just the Judaism, and was 1,000 years ago was or 2,000 years ago was the Old New Testament. We do have the Spiritism, but Spiritism can progress, and I think this is beautiful
Mm-hmm.
because we can read more things that's coming, or it's amazing. So I would recommend everybody, if they have time and they have willingness, read all the books.
Mhm.
And read the New Testament and the Old Testament with those minds, these minds. It's like it's a great to see evolution.
That's great. Yeah. Michelle.
Why do you think Spiritism hasn't spread worldwide as well as, say, for example, the other religions under
Mhm.
the
Okay.
Christian religion, so to speak?
Yeah.
And why has it only really blossomed so much in
In Brazil. Yeah, that is a great question, and I asked this to AI yesterday. So if anyone wants to interject, please do. So what happened after Kardec's discarnation is that the organization of the Parisian Spirit Society kind of got lost because he left the whole, and there were some disputes, like internal disputes, and then essentially were not able to organize themselves to continue to propagating the doctrine. Also, France at that time went into a very materialistic way with the secularism and the rationalism, scientific rationalism of everything that was developed at that time, then studies of magnetism, electricity, industrial revolution that came afterwards. And then the Spiritist, which was seen as a scientific branch, end up for that segment end up being seen as more as esotericism, and then it was kind of dismissed, I would say that way. France at that time was kind of one of the centers of the world, so there was a lot of connection between Brazil and France. Even my hometown, for example, has some architecture that's very French inspired. So France was kind of the main point at that time. So there was a lot of exchange. So Brazilians got to know Spiritism in France and brought back to Brazil. And Brazil has a fertile soil to grow. First, Brazil is very religiously open, let's put it that way. It's a predominantly Catholic country, but because of our history, we have religions from African origin. For example, there is the influence of indigenous people, and those things kind of mix and blend together. I heard one time some people saying that Catholicism in Brazil is very close to paganism because the way that we mix things. So it's not uncommon in Brazil seeing someone that is Catholic but says, "Oh, I go to the Spiritist Center every now and then to get a pass," for example, and that's okay, and that is okay. That's fine. So it's very open. Also, because of the social inequalities of Brazil, the opportunities to practice material charity and assistance were more evident, and the Spirit centers started to do that very profusely. And that kind of spread the word of Spiritism as well. My personal experience in the Spirit Center that I went to in a city called Macapá, which is very north in Brazil, as was at that time was a very small center made of wood close to a community of people with low income. And I remember at that time we had the Sunday lectures, and just before that would call the families to watch like some teaching, and we would offer some breakfast. For some of those families, that would be the only meal of the day. So that was this assistance, assistancealism, let's put it that way, background that, in more developed countries, we don't see as much, although there is an opportunity in the more developed countries as well. As we see in Toronto, we see homeless people as well, which is kind of impressive. Also, Brazil has had Spiritist leaders. So we have, for example, Chico Xavier, who we talk a lot, and he deserves a whole lecture himself about his life. I think we had one last year. He probably was the first, most important that popularized Spiritism. So there is, I would say, canonical event in his life in which he went to this TV show. It's called Pinga Fogo or Drop Fire, which was an interview show. And he is asked about several topics. And this was during the dictatorship, around the 70s, I would say. And he's asked about drugs, sexuality, reincarnation. And like he does a psychography, like on live TV. Imagine that in the 70s, for example. So, and that helped to popularize, Spiritism. Chico kind of became a leader. And you can see he psychographed over 400 books. And so that also helped. And in France, they did not have such a leadership. Spiritism Brazil became very organized. We have a federation. that helps to organize all the publications, gives some directives to the Spiritist Center. So we kind of unified in a way, although each Spirit Center has its own particular rules and way to run things, but it's kind of unified with the Spiritist Brazilian Federation. So there's a lot of organization. The Brazilian Spiritist Federation also helps with Spirit Center across the world, like in Canada and other countries. So put all this together, you can say, well, that's probably why Spiritism in Brazil blossomed, while in France it kind of diminished. Although there's still some Spiritist centers in France, there's still practice. And as we saw, Kardec's grave is still receiving flowers the whole year, and people still go there. So he still has the importance, maybe not the importance that he may have planned and predicted, but it's spread elsewhere.
I just add something
Yeah.
else. You have to remember that historically there's a book called Brasil, Coração do Mundo, Pátria do Evangelho. So Brazil, the heart of the world, the nation of the gospel.
Mhm.
And Brazil has been prepared for several, I'm just so she can see.
Yeah.
So Brazil has prepared for several centuries, has been prepared to be this nation of the gospel. What happened is it was supposed to be Europe as being the birth of the civilization, more or less. But due to so many history of wars and wars and wars and wars and wars, then Jesus looked at like, let's find another way because we're going to have to transfer this mission to us. Like, let's get Brazil. Okay, so that's what this book talks about. It talks about the line 1500. How it started, the right spirits start to come and reincarnate to prepare spiritually the country to receive the seeds that Kardec was going to bring from France. And and in fact, even before the books of Kardec arrived in Brazil, in the high society of Brazil and the nobles in Brazil, they already practicing the mediumistic groups. Not so much like in France as like an entertainment, but more as a way of studying, as a way of something a bit more serious. So when Kardec's teachings arrived in Brazil at that time, it was received in a much different way than was received in France. So even then, but so I don't make Kardec arrive in Brazil, because Brazil was not a center of scientific knowledge at the time. It was not, probably wouldn't be taken as serious as something as France was at the time, was booming of education, of scientific. So had to arrive in there, had to be born in there first, and then the seed being brought to Brazil. That even spiritual start was being prepared already to receive that seed and then flourish, and then from Brazil spread around the world.
That's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
But it's important to say as well, if I remember.
One second, though. We have one question in the back.
Just to kind of speak to your question, I have to find it. There's a great article that ties land ownership to the spread of religions. It's a simple way of answering. The Catholic Church is as big as it is because it's one of the biggest landowners in the country or in the world. So anyone's interested in
Yeah, what I was told, Brazil has a lifetime as well, right? If we do not evolve and we do not enrich the doctrine, it's like this might move to elsewhere.
Yes, it's not
Yeah.
It's not, we are not.
We're not. No, we're not special.
It's not privilege and then we see.
Yes.
If we do the same as Europe did,
Yeah.
there's no problem
Yeah.
to make
We're gonna
it
lose.
somewhere else.
So
we-
it is said that if Kardec hadn't taken the mission, someone else would. Like it would happen the same way, regardless. So it is to happen. It will happen. So if Brazil doesn't do well, then we're gonna move somewhere else.
Just
Yeah.
very clear, so
Yeah.
we are not the owners of.
No. Absolutely, we are not.
And I know it's time, ticking, but just one quick thing. A few things. First, Catholicism is one of the biggest one. How many years has it been spread? Over 2,000. Spiritism is what, a couple hundred, right?
Since
And
1857.
also, we are very proud of Spiritism because it makes so much sense to us. But when we ask ourselves, is Spiritism the final religion that everybody's going to follow? No. I think it's important that people in different cultures are open to life after death, which is a big step for us. Spiritism is here to give us a support for whoever wants to. And we're going to evolve as a planet, and we're not going to be a spiritist planet Earth. No, we're going to just learn more and more, and the seed is here. Spiritism is very young, and it's, it helped the planet to evolve together in a sense. Yeah. That's my thing.
Okay. And final one.
I'd like to mention, and I thought it was really interesting when you said during the lecture that the contents in which Spiritism arrived, it was a moment that religion was being questioned, and it was the idea of scientific progress of that. And nowadays we have a movement that is kind of against science, but is still not very open to religion as well. I think Latin Americans societies are a bit more open to that idea, but in the Western world as a general, we don't see that much. From my experience talking with people from different cultures, what I have seen is that religion is seen as limited to the idea of position, so you have to do that and you can't do that, and still your practices, but not actually in the sense of trying to understand God and ourselves and improving. So I would like to ask, what is it like to discuss religion in countries that has this idea of religion, even though Spiritism doesn't follow it, doesn't stipulate what you have to do, what you can't do. It's different in that sense.
So one thing that Kardec always emphasized is the free of thought. So people are free to think. You can present them your ideas, but at the end of the day, they're gonna decide what they're gonna do and which path they're gonna take. So he always respect that, and he always said, no, don't go to those who do not want to believe. They are already closed, because it's an infertile soil. But continue to spread, keep having conversations with people that are open to it, and respect their free will. Now, at one point, they will, realize that they will perceive the consequences of whatever actions they're taking, and then we'll amend ourselves. We know that we'll have several opportunities to learn, and we'll find our ways in our own time. So, keep talking, respecting, do not offend anyone, and keep trying to do your best. I think that's the best way.
Kardec writes about that in the Gospel introduction, and he says exactly that, because he was so intelligent in that sense of understanding kind of repercussions of what was going on at the time. So he says, you can dispute anything. You can dispute history. You can dispute that Jesus existed or not. You can dispute, the formation of the planets. You can find arguments basically against anything. But you cannot find arguments against the fact that we have to love one another, right? And expect that same relationship. Like, in other words, do unto others what you want others to do unto you. So that moral principle is basically the basis of everything he's done and we do. And because you can't really, there's no argument against that. That's why Spiritism evolved into that circle, right? And then there's very little, and that's why other religions go to a Spiritist center kind of thing. There's that's why there's no dogmas, there's no rules. Like, I think that's why Spiritism is not like a leading religion in the world, because we don't have a leader. Like, we don't have we don't have an organization scheme. We don't have a financial investment. And that is exactly why we're not a conventional religion. And that's why we're the unseen majority kind of thing. If you go to Brazil in the census, there's about 2.8 million declared Spiritists in the Brazilian census, right? But that's not a real number, because the vast majority of other religions also believe in the same principles we do, and they go to the Spirit Center to receive spiritual letters from people that are deceased, although their own religion believes that that's a sin, right? So that's the super interesting aspect about Spiritism. It's not bound by physical boundaries of kind of what it has to do or not, right? It's a primary philosophical principle. And I think that is really what separates us. And that's why you're not going to see Spiritism as the most popular religion in the world. That's never going to happen. but that's not how it's designed to happen, right? And I think we have to keep that in perspective. And as Kata said, Spiritism is constantly evolving, right? And we have that too. So in other words, what we know today is probably just like 1% of what we're going to know in 100 years. But the Spiritism allows you to do that, right? The same Spiritism will add on information that in 100 years will still be valid and true, right? And we're not going to be able to question our faith because our faith evolves with our own knowledge. And that's what the other regions don't allow you to do, right? And I think that's why if you put it all together, that's why you see Spiritism as a fundamental combination of philosophical, scientific, and religious principles, right? And not as an organized religion, right? And after you understand that, everything becomes easy, right? It's like, yeah, that's who we are, you know? We don't have to, right, worry about things, right? Don't worry about tomorrow kind of thing, right? Which is a very common, like, therapeutic intervention today, right? And CBT and DBT and like, you know, do not worry about tomorrow, right?
It's interesting because in the Spiritist book, there are a couple of questions that say you are not ready to receive.
Hold that thought. We have to close.
Thank you, Tiago. All right. I think it was a great lecture and a great discussion. We're going to say goodbye today, right now, to all the people that followed us over the internet today. Hoping to see you back here next Sunday.